Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're picking up where we left off, continuing our look into the narratives around the war in Ukraine.
That's right. And for anyone just joining, you might want to check out part 1 first. We introduced Expat American and Andrei Martyanov there, setting the scene a bit.
Definitely worth doing.
Yeah.
Because today, we're honing in on one specific clip. It's titled, Andrei Martyanov is questioned by an American about Ukraine's opening borders.
And this clip, well, it really does add some new layers to the things we were discussing.
It certainly does. So, as always, our aim here is to, pull out the key insights, the rhetorical moves, and help you understand what's being communicated and maybe how it's being communicated.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so Martyanov kicks off with a really specific take on Ukraine opening its borders for men aged 22 to 25. He says, point blank, it's not about troops, not logistics.
No, he calls it, and this is a direct quote, a desperate attempt to save some remnants of the Ukrainian sperm bank.
Right. I mean, that phrase just lands, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What's the immediate effect of using language like that?
Well, it's incredibly stark language, isn't it? Reducing young men, a whole group of people, simply to a biological function, a sperm bank.
Yeah.
It's a pretty clear example of dehumanization, stripping away individuality, humanity, purpose, reducing them to just biology.
And that's a known technique.
Oh, absolutely. It's a common tactic in, let's call it, psychological operations or intense propaganda. The goal is often to bypass your critical thinking.
How so?
By triggering a more visceral reaction, maybe disgust or dismissal, it erodes empathy, makes it easier for the audience to accept, extreme narratives or outcomes regarding that group.
Okay. And he builds on this. He says they, presumably Ukrainian leaders or elites, are trying to preserve this sperm bank for national survival.
Even while, according to him, NATO and Washington were supposedly pushing for 18-year-olds to be drafted.
And then he throws out a number, a very specific number.
He does. He claims that in the first 12 hours after the borders opened, 11,900 young people aged 22, 25 just ran out of the country.
11,900. In 12 hours. That level of precision is noticeable.
It is. And combining that kind of dehumanizing language with these dramatic, completely unsourced numbers, it serves a clear purpose.
Which is?
To paint this picture of absolute desperation, a nation collapsing, led by cynical elites making these bizarre biological calculations. It creates a powerful narrative.
But one we need to question.
Definitely. You have to ask, where does that number come from? What's the actual evidence? And maybe more importantly, what's the intent behind using that specific number in that kind of language? It feels designed to shock, to create this sense of inevitable doom.
Okay, so this narrative of desperation, of cynical elites, it leads him to the next point, who's to blame. He says Russians are not doing this deliberately.
Right. He shifts the blame entirely. It's NATO, he says, and Ukraine's so-called corrupt elites. They were the war criminals, the ones in Washington, London, Brussels.
The ones who wanted the war to go to the last Ukrainian.
Exactly. It's a classic rhetorical move, externalizing responsibility, shifting all the blame away from one side and projecting it entirely onto others.
Portraying them as just inherently bad or completely corrupt.
He's very clear on that. He states something like, no normal people, essentially, in the political elite in Ukraine. It was always corrupt, utterly corrupt.
Which ties back to what we discussed in part 1, right? This idea of framing aggression as a necessary response to some deep-seated evil from the other side.
Precisely. It fits that pattern of positioning oneself as the victim even when initiating action.
So following that thread, he then makes some pretty bold claims about the state of the Ukrainian military.
He asserts that most of the Ukrainian brigades today are at about between 20 to 30% of the personnel.
20 to 30%.
Yeah, and says they're not really brigades, they're barely regiments. Again, very specific number.
It feels like a pattern here. What do we make of these kinds of figures, especially given his track record?
It is a recurring pattern. Remember in part 1, we talked about the claims of, 1.8 million Ukrainian KIA.
Yes, and the 1,300 tanks a year, Russia having 10 times NATO's precision munitions.
Right. Huge, strategically decisive numbers. And like those previous claims, these new figures about brigade strength, 20 to 30%, they come with absolutely no supporting evidence, no verification.
So we should apply the same skepticism.
I think we have to. If you just take that 20-30% figure at face value and consider how long the war has been going on, Well, you'd have to wonder how any coherent fighting force could possibly still exist.
It doesn't quite add up logically if you push it.
It doesn't. And that suggests the goal isn't really logical analysis. It's more about perhaps number inflation, using big, scary numbers to create an emotional impact.
That gut punch of fear or hopelessness you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Rather than encouraging a careful look at the actual situation.
This all seems to feed into, or maybe stem from, his fundamental view of war itself. He offers what he calls a philosophical gem.
Ah, yes. He declares that the idea of war is a physical annihilation of your enemy.
Annihilation. He attributes this to a Soviet strategist, Alexander Swun, emphasizing destroying personnel, destroying the industrial base.
It's a very stark definition, isn't it? Framing war in purely absolute terms. No room for negotiation, limited objectives, just destruction.
A zero-sum game taken to the extreme.
Pretty much. And it's within that very specific, very harsh framework that he then makes his big declaration.
Which is?
This is the war by the combined West against Russia, and it's lost. Just like that. Declared. Finished.
The war is lost.
Yeah.
For the West.
Yeah, right.
But how does that statement actually, square with what we can observe happening on the ground?
Well, that's where the contradictions start to pile up, don't they? If you look at other reporting, other sources, we hear about Russia's advance often being incredibly slow.
Right, the 50 meters a day kind of reports.
Exactly. That doesn't really paint a picture of overwhelming victory leading to an already lost war for the other side. And then there's the evidence that Russia has had to actively seek external help.
Sourcing drones from Iran, shells from North Korea, things like that.
Right, which again doesn't quite fit the narrative of an unstoppable industrial power that has already effectively won. And you also have Ukraine's successes, like pushing the Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol.
Forcing them to move valuable ships.
Significant naval assets, yes. So these observable realities, they really challenge that simple declaration that the war is lost for the West. It suggests things are far more complex, far more contested.
Okay, shifting slightly. He also takes aim at Western expertise, particularly military understanding.
He does. He claims most people, including from Pentagon, they believe what Hollywood put out there about war.
Hollywood.
Yes. He even quotes a General Robert Latif from back in 2016, apparently saying the American public and elites learn about war from movies.
What's the purpose of that line of argument? Discrediting the entire institution.
It seems like it. It's a way to dismiss the knowledge base and analysis of established military and political bodies. You paint them as naive, unserious, influenced by entertainment.
So you don't have to engage with their actual assessments?
Exactly. It's a form of what you might call enemy labeling, undermining their credibility wholesale.
And he doesn't stop there. He doubles down, saying there are no Russian experts in the West. Full stop.
Right. Dismissing academics from places like Harvard, Stanford, the Ivy League, calls them academic frauds, even morons with PhDs.
Wow. So what's the goal of just wiping the slate clean like that, saying no one in the West understands Russia?
It's a powerful technique, often called the secret knowledge posture. If you can successfully discredit all other potential sources of information,
And you position yourself as the only one left, the sole holder of truth.
precisely, it's a key tool in psychological operations. You try to make your audience dependent on your narrative by systematically eroding their trust in anyone else, in any diverse perspectives or critical analysis.
There's a certain irony there, though, isn't there?
There is. Because, as has been pointed out, many Western analysts did predict the invasion quite accurately, sometimes down to the month it would happen.
While some voices closer to or within Russia were dismissing the possibility.
Exactly. So it raises that question again. Whose expertise? Whose predictions are actually being validated by real-world events?
He then circles back to Russia's supposed industrial strength, repeating those big numbers.
Yes. Russia produces more steel and iron than the United States line, the 1,300 tanks a year, versus Europe's 40.
And the 10 times more, high precision, smart munitions than whole NATO combined.
They are definitely impressive figures meant to convey this image of overwhelming power and self-sufficiency.
But as we said before,
As we've noted, yeah. The critical question remains, how do these numbers stack up against the observable reality? If the industrial might and munitions advantage are that vast.
why the need for Iranian drones or North Korean artillery shells?
Exactly. It points to those glaring contradictions we're trying to illuminate. Where the numbers presented seem detached from the actions we see on the ground, it highlights that difference between, rhetoric where numbers can be presented freely and reality, which often has practical constraints and costs.
And then, almost like a punctuation mark to many of these points, there's the constant refrain about corruption.
Ah, yes. Ukraine's leaders are all corrupt. Everyone, always.
That broad stroke seems to serve a very specific purpose in his arguments.
It really does. It functions as a kind of universal explanation, a catch-all excuse almost.
How do you mean?
Well, any setback for Ukraine, any perceived problem, any policy decision he disagrees with it, can all be instantly attributed to corruption. It avoids needing any deeper, more specific analysis of the situation.
Just simplifies everything down to they're corrupt.
Right. It plays on existing narratives or prejudices and offers a simple, easily digestible reason that shuts down further inquiry into more complex factors.
So as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, looking back at this specific clip, it really feels like a concentrated display of certain techniques.
I think that's fair to say. It showcases a range of rhetorical strategies designed very intentionally to shape perception. We've seen the dehumanizing language,
The unsubstantiated numbers delivered with such precision.
the systematic discrediting of any alternative sources of expertise,
Yeah.
the constant blame shifting.
All wrapped up in this narrative of absolute conflict and predetermined outcomes.
Yeah. So what we've been looking at here, it goes beyond just a simple interview or analysis, doesn't it?
It feels much more like a performance, a carefully constructed narrative using, as you said, familiar cliches, maybe some nostalgia, delivered to reinforce a particular worldview.
And our job really is to keep pulling back the curtain on these kinds of narratives, to try and separate genuine insight from rhetoric that's purely designed to persuade or manipulate.
And if you haven't seen part 1 yet, we really do recommend going back. It gives crucial context on the speakers themselves and some of the earlier points they made.
Definitely. And all this analysis, it brings us to a final thought, perhaps a question for you, the listener.
Which is,
In today's world, where information and narratives can be so deliberately crafted, distorted, even weaponized, how do we build our own resilience?
how do we ensure our understanding of complex events stays grounded, stays ours, and isn't subtly swayed by these kinds of techniques?
It's a critical question, I think. Something important for all of us to consider as we navigate the sheer volume of information out there.